Hello. Welcome to today's book. It's called Yucky Worms. It's written by Vivian French. That's her name, and it has very adorable illustrations or pictures. So I hope you'll enjoy the book. One day when I was in Grandma's garden, Grandma dug up a slimy, slithery, wiggly worm. Yuck! I said. Throw it away! Throw it away? Grandma looked horrified. Would you throw away one of your friends? You can't be friends with a worm, I said. You can't even tell which end is which. Yes, you can. Watch. Grandma put the worm down. It gave a kind of squirmy wriggle and disappeared really fast, pointy and first. As the rounded end vanished, Grandma said, "There goes its tail." I bent down to look, and I could see it had left a little tunnel. "Where did it go?" I asked. "Home," Grandma said. "It's an earthworm. It lives underground. In most backyards, there will be about 15 worms in every square yard of soil. But what does it eat? Dirt? I wanted to know. It eats tiny, tiny stones and bits of dirt, Grandma told me. But worms eat other things too, like rotting leaves and flowers and fruit and dead insects. They especially like eating at night when it's cool. The stones and dirt help to grind everything up in the worm's stomach, and then the worm poops it back out. Worms come above ground to find things to eat too. They pull their food back down as they wriggle into the ground again. Grandma pointed at the flower bed. "Look, can you see?" I bent down and I saw what looked like a weird long curly worm made of dirt. "That's worm poop," Grandma said. "It's called a cast. You know when you recycle things? Well, worms do it too. There's still a lot of goodness left in the things a worm eats, and when the goodness comes out again as poop, it helps plants to grow big and strong. And as the worms move around under and on top of the soil, the poop gets spread around the garden." That's why worms are my friends. Grandma gave me a thumbs up. And it's not just their poop that's good for plants. The tunnels they dig loosen the soil so roots can stretch out and air and rainwater can get in. "But it's dangerous being a worm," Grandma said. I stared at her. "Dangerous?" I asked. She smiled at me. "Lots and lots of animals think worms make the most delicious dinner. Birds love them, and so do moles, badgers, frogs, hedgehogs, and foxes. Even some slugs eat worms, and human beings accidentally slice through them with spades and spike them with forks. It's a tough life." "Cutting them in half doesn't hurt them, Grandma," I said. "They just turn into two worms and keep on growing." Grandma shook her head. "Poor worms. Lots of people think that, but it's not true." She put her fork down. "Time for a snack. A worm's tail can regrow if it's cut off, but cutting a worm in half will kill it." Grandma had tea and I had orange juice. "Can I dig up a worm?" I asked. "If it rains," Grandma said, "the worms will come up on their own." Worms breathe through their skins. They don't mind the soil around them being wet. But if their tunnels are flooded, they come up to the surface to move around more easily. I took a cookie. "What if it doesn't rain?" Grandma winked at me. "We'll use the watering can and pretend." I finished my cookie as fast as I could. Can we trick the worms now? Grandma filled the watering can and I watered the ground. Then I stood back. I didn't want worms chewing at my shoes. They only put their heads out, Grandma promised, and it'll be a while before they do. When it's very hot and the soil gets too dry to slither through, a worm will wriggle down to where the soil is still damp and wait for rain. When it's very cold, a worm will wriggle down even deeper below the frost level and curl up with other worms for warmth. Grandma was right. I had time to eat 2 more cookies before she said, "Look!" "Wow," I said. I could just see the tip of a worm, and it's right here, above the ground. "Now watch this." Grandma stamped her foot, and the worm disappeared. "Did it see you?" I asked. Grandma shook her head. "Worms don't have eyes. They feel vibrations, though. And a thump like that might mean a hungry bird is landing. Danger!" Grandma dug her fork in the ground. Up came lots of dirt and wriggly worms. She picked one up and washed it in the watering can. "Mustn't drop it," she said. "They can't swim." Grandma put the clean worm on some paper and held it near my ear. I could hear a tiny rustling noise. "What's that?" "They're covered in little bristles," Grandma said. "The bristles in their muscles help them move." And here's a picture of a worm going through a tunnel. "I've got muscles too." I bent my arm so Grandma could see. "If you got so many muscles," she said, "maybe you'd like to help me plant my sunflower seedlings." "Okay," I agreed, and then I thought of something. "When I go to school on Monday, I'm going to say that I've got lots of new friends." "Good idea," Grandma said. "But," I said, "I might not actually say they're worms." How to be a wormologist. All right, so you need to look for worm casts in your garden or in the park, leaves sticking up out of the ground, worms on the surface after it rains. So if you do pick up a worm, remember to be respectful. A worm is a living creature. All right, so hopefully you'll be on the lookout for worms so you can check them out. And that is the end of our story.